Welcome to the Situation Room. I'm James Cary, and today I'm talking to author, screenwriter, game designer, and Australian currently living in Los Angeles, Peter C Hayward. Hello, Peter. How you doing?
Good. That last one pays less than the rest put together. That one's actually very expensive to do.
Okay.
You listed like three jobs and then a huge drain on my finances. So it was a nice
Okay.
balance.
Okay. Yeah. So we've talked before on the Sitcom Geeks podcast because you wrote a very funny episode of a thing called Night Crew, which we'll talk about. Because my focus at the moment is making your own audio. And boy, did you make your own audio. Just to fill in our listeners, Night Crew is a sort of traditional audio sitcom about Samantha Sharp, an up-and-coming space officer. And she requests a transfer to the SS Freedom to explore deep space under her hero, Captain Mansfield. And she learns he works the night shift. And at night they do the dishes. Adventure, excitement, explosions, but most of all, listeners, jokes. There are many, many fine jokes in this show. So this might all be a distant memory for you,
I was
Peter.
going to say it's like running into an ex. You're reading
Yeah,
this, and I'm like, that was so much of my life for a full year.
yeah,
And since then, like I've almost put it away in a little box, and
yeah.
I don't think about it.
Yeah. No, well, let's dredge over it and bring back the horrific details. Do you want to just say a bit about why you wanted to make an audio version of this script that you wrote? And you wrote it as audio to begin with, didn't you?
Yes, yes. So I've been listening to Cabin Pressure by John Finnemore, who was also on Sitcom Geeks.
Yeah.
I just casually was on the same show as John
John
Finnemore. We're
Finnemore, one of
basically
the
the same
most
level,
talented
yeah.
writers of his age. Yeah.
And so I was listening to Cabin Pressure, and I was just like, I could do this. And so I'm in LA, as you mentioned, as we mentioned earlier, to try to break into sitcoms. Basically, that's my
Yeah.
sort of 5-10 year goal. And one thing I've learned is that LA respects a hustle, and the world generally, but LA loves someone who's made their own stuff, because you're not turning up and page one, four cats get into a fight, and they're like, how are we meant to make this? You've got some
Yeah.
experience, you've shown that you're serious about it, you've done the work. And so rather than film, as someone who makes podcasts, you understand making something video, especially at a professional level, is 10 orders of magnitude more expensive
Yeah.
than making audio. So I thought I'll make it. Once I listened to Cabin Pressure, I was like, oh, you can actually like make something, because I think Cabin Pressure holds its own with Faulty Towers and all the great sitcoms of the day.
It is a great sitcom. Yeah.
And it's radio, it's pure audio. And I was like, okay, I know that I could afford to make this. I know that I could, and it's a writer's medium too, is the thing. Like
Yeah.
TV more and more is kind of a director's medium. It's a visual medium. Writing in radio sitcoms is king, because if
Yeah.
there's no, everything that you're hearing has been written. The director
Yeah.
doesn't really get to add any flourishes in that respect.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought, to show off my ability to write, I would record a sitcom, make it as well as I could, and ideally crowdfund a series. And then, worst case scenario, I get to make a few seasons of a show that I'm really excited by.
Yeah. So so you did make a pilot. Do you want to say about how you went about doing that? Because you'd never really made audio before. I mean, you've done a whole load of amazing things in your career, but actually making and producing an audio podcast, an audio, half hour, that's kind of hard. So where did you start? Where did you get advice? How did you go about it?
Yeah, so so you're setting me up here, James, because I got a lot of advice from you and Dave from Sitcom
Okay.
Geeks. I
Yeah.
was emailing you all the time with questions, and you were very generously kind of mentoring me, is the way I thought about it. Just being like, hey, here's our thoughts on this, here's our thoughts on that. At one point, I hired you to do a script edit,
Yeah.
just basically using whatever resources I had. In terms of one thing I really wanted to do was get some big names on it. So I reached out to a lot of my favorite YouTubers, and they never responded. And so
Okay.
I eventually reached out to a casting director in LA, and this was during the pandemic, so everyone was sort of like sitting
Yeah.
at home bored.
Yeah.
So he reached back and he's like, look, normally I would be outside of your price range. It would make no sense for this to happen.
Yeah.
But he essentially said, I like your hustle, kid, and said, look,
Okay.
I'll do
I
this
like
for,
the
I think it's
cutting edge.
$300.
Yeah.
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 He's like, I've never seen something like this. I've never seen someone attempt something like this. And if you pull it off, that's really cool. So for $300, I will be a casting director for you. So he put ads up on all the different sites. He
Yeah.
reached out to the agents of all these YouTubers I liked, and I think I got my first pick for every single role. So I had
Wow.
ProZD, Sungwon Cho, who's a quite famous YouTuber. He has 5 million subscribers, if that means anything to you, as two of the roles. I had Jenny Nicholson, who's one of my favorite YouTubers, as a very small bit part. And then I had the voice of Tommy Pickles as one of the main characters, and the voice of Jimmy Neutron as another main character. I just really like, it was a genuinely star-studded
Yeah.
cast.
Shoot for the moon. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So but obviously you'd I mean, although there was a global pandemic on, you did have to pay them. So I guess so you set yourself a budget, and how did
Yeah.
you decide? You don't have to go into numbers necessarily, but how did you decide how much to spend on it?
So I basically, at that point, my day job, for various reasons, my day job did very well during the pandemic. Like, it was one of those few industries that really kind of took off because
Yeah.
there was a global pandemic. So I was not rich by any means, but I had a little bit of cash. So I was like, okay, look, if I can make the first episode for $5,000, which is not nothing, that's a substantial amount.
Sure.
But if I can make it really well, then it's worth $5,000 in lessons and like
Yeah.
learning how it all works.
Yeah.
So I can tell you some numbers, which is that I think the biggest YouTuber sung, ProZD sung one, was I think about $1,500 for the two roles.
Right.
And then voice actors get paid peanuts. I was so shocked by this. So even though there were two big names, they were also doing it because they liked the script, and we jumped on a call and they liked me. So I think they were about $300 to $500 each, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
And then I paid about $1,000 for someone to do like a full soundscape, basically, like all the background noise and all the sound effects and stuff like that. And then I actually did the original edit because I have been an editor in the past. That's one of my various past lives. So I sat down and I edited it on my iPad. Actually, I did a full iPad edit.
Oh wow,
and I was really happy with it.
I'm so full of respect for you, because I have an iPad, I use it a lot, but I would never attempt anything like that. I don't even like buying stuff from Amazon on my iPad. I just do anything meaningful has to be on my laptop. So wow, you just made it even harder, and I'm even more impressed with
It was the ability to use the pen. Like, I have the iPad Pro,
okay.
so I was able to use the pen to edit, and I could do it anywhere. So like with the computer, you have to be sitting there with this, especially going through rushes. So we had like I directed the thing, so I over took takes. So we had like 10 to 20 takes of almost every single line, because with voice, it's just one person. You say the line until you're happy with it. You move on to the next line. You say that until you're happy with it. You move on to the next line. So all in all, it was about, for a half-hour sitcom, was maybe an hour for every single actor, and that was it.
Wow.
So I had, which is not much for them, but for me, I had 6 hours of footage to go through.
Yeah.
So I went through and cut that down, but I could do that anywhere. I could do that while waiting for my breakfast to cook or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess also, because you were only recording one and you'd paid them a fee, as it were, taking an hour of their time rather than 40 minutes of their time is just like, who cares? I mean, if you were recording a number, you'd probably only do 3 or 4 takes, or there'd be different ways of doing it. But everyone was self-taping on this, and were they?
Everyone except for one. So the main character was the only non-name. I just found her on one of the casting websites. I just loved her stuff, and she turned out to be local in LA.
Right.
So I ended up hiring. Well, she actually did a self-tape first, but it was unusable. She just didn't know how to self-tape because she wasn't a voice actor.
Yeah.
So I ended up just booking a studio, going in, recording with her, and this was during high pandemic. So we were masked. The technician was masked. We were standing as far away from each other as we could in a small recording booth. And then the sound technician actually lost the footage. So we had to go back again next week and record the whole thing again.
Oh, wow. Oh, man, that's really poor form from that. I mean,
they were very deeply apologetic, and they recorded the second one 4 different ways.
Okay, great. Yeah. And so they should. So you weren't actually recording it, because what I would do, I would sort of work out a way of recording it so everyone's recording at the same time. I mean, maybe over Zoom in that case, and try to get a performance where people are reacting off each other. But
that would have been ideal in person.
Yeah.
But on Zoom, I just think like it. Even 2 people, you end up. Nowadays, we're all much more Zoom proficient. But again, this was during like not early pandemic, but like end of 2020. So people were really not quite used to the talking over each other. I did try to book all LA actors so that if we could do a whole season after the pandemic, then we could all get together and record together.
Yeah.
And most importantly, I did a table read. So I got everyone on Zoom just for a table read once, just because I wanted everyone to hear the other actors and bounce off each
that's
other in that
great.
regard.
Yeah.
But then for the actual recording, we did it one-on-one, which I think was the right move.
Yeah. And actually, good actors, it's amazing how much they don't need the other voices to be read in, because they're really good at it. I mean, this is their only job, let's be honest.
Right.
But they do it terribly well. And especially experienced voice actors. I mean, they're just incredible.
I recorded Debbie Derryberry, who's the voice of Jimmy Neutron, and if you look her up, she's had I think at this point, thousands of like iconic voice roles. She's just
Yeah.
incredible. She and Sungwon were the two first ones I recorded, and they basically taught me how to direct voice actors,
Yeah.
because I'd done some in-person acting directing before, and it was really emphasized to me like, don't demonstrate. Like, actors hate it when you demonstrate and
Yeah.
you're like, say it like this. Voice actors are the opposite. They're like, tell me how you want me to say it, and then I
Right.
do the line, then they mirror it back, and I'm like, that's exactly how I wanted the line. Yes. And they taught me all the terminology. I've actually forgotten a lot of it now, but like,
Yeah.
so there's some phrase that you use that'll key them to do it like 3 times in a row, so they can kind of
Okay.
get the rhythm going. And just like,
Wow.
so I wish I remembered it so I could be more useful to your listenership. But it was really wonderful having
Yeah.
these seasoned professional voice actors who I guarantee everyone listening to this has heard in like a dozen things, even if you don't know it, teaching me, a rube straight off the boat, brand
Yeah.
new to LA, how to direct them. It was
Yeah.
really a wonderful experience.
And so it is worth thinking, if people are prepared to spend a bit of money on an experienced voice actor, the fee is not as high as you think, because they're still they're for session recordings, even for stuff that you've heard of, they're getting hundreds, not thousands. Some are getting
Well,
thousands, but they're not getting
it
tens of
takes them an
thousands.
hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's 300 for you, which as a percentage of a budget is not too much, but for them, it's 300 for literally an hour of work. Like that's a rate that no one's going to complain about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good, and so, but also they'll just give you the reading. They'll just give you what you
Yeah.
want. And if it's not what you want, they want to give you what you want. They're not going to go, this is how I would do it, and this is how I see the character. It's like, how do you want this? You want it? Oh, you want it more excited, like this kind of thing. Like this, yeah. That's great. Okay.
And they will bring their expertise to it. So if you're not sure, they can give you 4 different takes. I think it was like A, B or something like that. They're like, I'll give you a take, then I'll give you a wildly different take, and you can tell me if you want it in the middle, if you want it more extreme. Like there's, I cannot express how good they were to work with.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
wonderful.
And so I think a lot of people who've never done this before might be quite frightened of actors because they sort of don't want to get it wrong, don't want to insult them, don't want
Have you ever
to.
eaten with one?
Yes, yeah. What is that? It's the producers, isn't it?
The producers, yeah.
They're actors. You ever eaten with one? Yeah. Go take money, buy bullets. But yeah. So in one sense, you get what you pay for, but actually, the very, very higher you go. If you've heard of a household name who's not a voice actor, they probably would charge you a lot of money, and they're not as
Oh
experienced.
yeah.
But somebody who's got a lot of voiceover experience will probably
they want to work as the thing. They do it like no one gets into acting, writing, etc. for the money. They do it because they want to work. So
yeah.
there are these websites where you post jobs and people will send audition tapes.
Yeah.
And so Debbie wakes up every day. Debbie Derryberry, we've actually become quite close because she's LA, and we have dinner every now and again, which is quite nice for me.
Right.
If nothing else, I got a friend out of the project.
Yeah.
She wakes up every day and spends like an hour going on the audition sites and recording audition lines for all the things.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And also
complete gamble for her, but she likes the job.
Yeah. And she's got an $800 microphone and a sound booth in which to do it. And that hasn't cost you anything.
Exactly. And she actually has it in her house. I went to her house and she showed me a like beautiful little, like, you open her office and then there's a side glass door with a recording studio, because that's her thing. And so
that's the job.
And so Riley, who played Sam Sharp, the protagonist, she didn't have that. So she was in her mother's closet and she was bumping the microphone. And again, she was wonderful. I really liked working with her, but she didn't have that setup. So the kind of quote unquote discount I got on hiring Riley, I ended up spending to go into a recording studio.
Yeah. No, brilliant. So you did all this stuff. You learned an absolute ton. And not also as a writer, didn't you? You kind of hearing the lines, suddenly you're learning. Any reflections on that about what you learned as a writer?
So I don't know if you want to get into the kind of the post-mortem of it. I'll tell you, before we recorded and released, I made sure that every draft that I was done, I'd actually call my sister up, who lives in Australia, and over just Facebook Messenger voice, we would just do the whole script. We would pick 2 characters each and go back and forth, or sometimes at the start of a scene, I'd be like, okay, I don't want you doing a whole scene against yourself, so I'll be this character, you'll be this one. And I wanted to hear every single line. This is something I've discovered most screenwriters, even LA, don't do. They'll write the script and then send it off, and it never exists in someone's mouth, which is so weird to me. I make board games as well, I think I mentioned, and board games, the crux to making a board game is playtesting. You're constantly getting it to the table again and again and again. So for me, writing a script and then sending it off without ever listening to it is like designing a board game and then without ever playing it, being like, cool, this is good to go. It's just never going to work. Like,
Mad.
not
Yeah.
never.
Yeah.
Obviously, a
Mad.
lot of
Yeah.
scripts
No,
do.
yeah, for a board game, that is literally never going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for screenplays, not only do I call my sister, I also have a little app. I can't remember the name of it offhand, but I'll send it to you later if you want it for the show notes.
Sure.
Which just you assign a voice to every character. It takes final draft scripts. You assign a voice to every character. And so while I'm cleaning my room, I can just listen to the whole script being read out by just a robotic voice.
Okay.
And because it's so clunky, it's almost like a stress test. It's the worst possible reading. So you really notice a bad line.
Okay. Wow. That's a real baptism of fire, isn't it? That's
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
I fear that a lot of creatives are like afraid to, like you said, like put your feet to the fire, but that's how you find out if th'll burn or not.
Yeah.
to take that metaphor in a weird direction.
Yeah. So you pulled it all together, you put it up, and you put it.
Crickets.
What did you? Okay, so it was comparative crickets, I guess, but where did you put it up? Where did you post it? What platforms?
So I tried to do some pre-marketing. Marketing is not my strong suit, which is awful if you're trying to make your own stuff. But it's the kind of the curse of the modern age is that you have to be good at everything to be good at one specific thing.
Yeah.
You have to be a generalist in order to be a specialist. And so the goal of being the goal is to be a specialist, but to get there, you have to spend years being a generalist. It's infuriating.
Yeah.
And so I did some pre-marketing on TikTok. I had clips. I got some art done for it, and I just had that going up on TikTok. I put a little excerpt up on YouTube. I have quite a large Facebook following just because I've been on the internet forever and like in a bunch of creative fields. So I was putting clips up every day on that, telling stories. I actually hired someone, a friend of mine who does podcasts, to do a interview show. So he interviewed every single cast member, and every week before the show released, I put another one of those up. So that was like, I did as much building. And then I had all of these people not only linked to the show when it came out, not only linked to the previews, but it was in their contract that they had to like actively talk about it on Twitter and their social media. Because, I have 3,000 Facebook followers. Someone like ProZD or Debbie Derryberry or EG Daily, they've got thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not millions. Like they're in the huge digits. So I did all that I could to get it up there. And then when I finally released it, I went on YouTube. It went on all the podcast apps that you'd expect.
Yeah.
I think that was it. I don't think there's anywhere else I put it, but I had a YouTube channel for it, and I had all the podcast stuff with all this pre-marketing for months.
Yeah. And so, what kind of audience were you hoping for? What did you get?
So it's been so long ago that I can't remember numbers, but I remember seeing the read rates. I was so excited for this. I'm going to tell you an embarrassing story that I've never told. I called my podcast host and I was like, hey, if this really takes off, can you handle the bandwidth? And they were like, yes. Yes, we'll be okay.
Yes, guy I've never heard of. I think we'll be fine. Yeah.
I was just like, with all these people promoting it, like, I'm sure this is going to pop off. And I don't remember the numbers, but as soon as it launched, like within the first 2 days, I was like, oh, this is not going to fund on Kickstarter. Like it just can't with these numbers. With Kickstarter, you want to.
So you launched. So in a way, do you want to just say how you launched episode 1 as then part of a Kickstarter to launch a series?
Yes, I only had episode 1. I had outlines for the other episodes, and I had like some early drafts of scripts. But the goal was launch episode 1, and then a month later followed up with a Kickstarter for the rest of the season.
Okay.
With my idealistic stars in my eyes idea being like, everyone's going to be so excited with this episode 1, they will leap to the Kickstarter. I expected a conversion rate of maybe like 0.5 to 1%, which sounds low, but for the internet is enormous.
That's fine. Yeah. You'd settle for that. Yeah.
And so when I got, let's say, 2,000 listens, I was like, oh yeah, 1% of this, like I'm not going to get 1% of this, because 2,000 means that it has not reached a critical mass. I've not found my 1,000 true fans or whatever. If 2,000 views, say on YouTube, means that 500, 400 people watched it the whole way through, like if that.
Yeah.
And so I just knew from day one it was not going to fund. And then I told myself, you know what, it's because no one has the investment. Once I have the Kickstarter, I was very insistent that this worked in my own mind. Once I have the Kickstarter, people will then be like, oh, there could be more of this. I'll get invested. And again, just like, I think I had a $10,000 goal. I think I made like 2,000-3,000, which is not nothing.
Sure.
And had I not had a budget of like 3,000-4,000 episode, I would have been okay with that. But I was just, I was nowhere near it.
Yeah, I guess so. You were coming in at quite a high level. So your initial pilot was 5K, but to make a
Yeah.
series, you'd need another 25, 30.
So
Um,
I said 10K for 3 more episodes because a
yeah,
big part of these stretch goals.
yeah,
So if
yeah,
I can hit 10K, I'd do a season of 4. That would be great, and I'd probably be losing a little bit of money. Like there were some upfront costs that I wouldn't have to pay again per episode. But this was an investment. I'd already invested 5,000. I was happy to invest another
yeah.
5,000 to if I could get a whole season going.
Mm.
And then again, the idea was after season 1, then I'd have more of an audience for season 2 and season 3. There's a show called Wooden Overcoats. I don't know if you've heard of
Yeah,
this one.
yeah,
They had a similar model, but they did a whole season up front. So
yeah.
they self-funded an entire season, and then they made maybe 20K on that. Like they did, or maybe I can't remember the numbers, maybe 12K.
Sure.
But then season 2 did more, season 3 did more, and then they really
Yeah,
like made some money by the end of it.
yeah, yeah. Again, I'd imagine their budgets are still pretty small, and it may be that they made a series for what you made a pilot for, or
Exactly.
um,
Yeah.
and it is so with hindsight. Again, no, just want to say to audience listeners, I mean, you've run successful Kickstarters for board games. I mean,
Oh
you know
yes.
Kickstarter. Yeah.
Yeah, I've made a lifetime over $1 million on Kickstarter.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is my area of domain
yeah,
expertise.
yeah. No, and that's but you didn't quite have the raw material you needed in order to get that critical mass to get it over the line. And
Yeah.
how do you reflect on that? What would you have done differently? What yeah,
So
you
so
obviously had yeah, go on.
there's sort of two answers to the question. So I'm going to answer one briefly and then the other one in more detail.
Mm,
In terms of a learning experience, I wouldn't do anything differently because I learned so much from it. I became a better writer as a result. I got some interesting connections. I learned so much about producing. I learned more about Kickstarter, which is where my board game company makes the majority. Like that's our market. So I wouldn't do anything again with a time machine. But if I was
sure.
to do it again today,
Yeah.
the things that I would do is just keep costs low. Like it was real. I really wanted to go all out, so I didn't want to finish the Kickstarter and be like, well, if I'd had big names or well, if I put money into editing,
Right.
like I didn't want to have an excuse for it to fail. So I'm glad that I did all of that.
Yeah.
Now that I've done that and I've seen that the big names were wonderful to work with and I learned a lot from them. But in terms of like the cost to benefit ratio of as a product, like as a business,
Yeah.
basically, they didn't bring enough audience to justify their costs, which is not their job. Like
Sure.
you're
Yeah.
not, you're not paying. I guess maybe if you're paying Benedict Cumberbatch, he's bringing an audience. But when you're
Sure.
paying someone to do their craft, like if I hire you to write a sitcom, I'm not like, hey, can you write a sitcom? And I expect you to bring the audience for it. That's sort of my job as the producer.
Yeah, unless the cast member was also in Red Dwarf. And
Right,
this is
right.
this is another science fiction thing. But then for that, I mean, they probably would say no because they've already been in Red Dwarf and they would feel eggy about being in another sci-fi thing and promoting that and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it is tricky, isn't it? To kind of
I'll,
leverage the cast,
I'll
isn't it?
tell you a very quick tangent, which is that as I was building up to this and I was starting to, it was taking over my life. That's why I said it's like talking about next. I'm like, oh yeah, this used to be all consuming, and now I just
Okay.
don't think about it
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah, yeah.
Like when you live with someone and then you never see them again. It's such a weird break. While this was taking over my life, one of my friends actually bought me a Cameo. You know that website where you can like get celebrities to like do a little voice
Okay.
message
Yeah.
from Norman Lovett.
Oh
And
wow, the original Holly.
the original Holly. And so in her description for this thing, she wrote what Night Crew was. And so I have this really lovely personal message from Norman Lovett about how it's great that I'm making a thing and I'm hustling and I'm going out there. It just like it was such a bright spot. So
Oh,
I'd say someone like Norman Lovett would actually be open to this because it's such a cool like thing to do, especially if you like the script. That was key. All these actors who signed on liked the script. I think
yeah,
if the script had not been as strong as it was, they wouldn't have.
yeah,
So if I was to do it again to answer the question from earlier, I would probably use like friends and family, which feels so cheap and like
yeah,
disrespectful, but like so many people would do it for free or for a pittance or to support it or for
yeah,
points or whatever. And so that way my budget per episode could be closer to 1,000 instead of
yeah.
5,000. And I raised, almost 4,000. I think I've not looked at the numbers in years, but something like that.
Mm,
That would have been enough for a season of 5 episodes. And
yeah,
once you have a season of 5 episodes, there's more people to watch and more people to find or listen to, and then you can potentially do another one. So
yeah.
my goal was to
Yeah.
make this show, and I think a budget of 1,000 would have let me make the show. But my
Mm,
other goal was to not have an excuse for it to have, not have a post hoc excuse as to why it failed. And so for that, I'm glad I put the 5,000 in.
yeah, yeah. So I think what I'm hearing, and this would, I would suggest this as a tactic generally. If you're trying to make a name for yourself as a writer, if you're trying to start a project from scratch, especially within the audio space, I think, but actually within YouTube as well, is you can't beat multiple episodes, something that's sustainable, that can run and run and run, and people start to take notice, you improve, it builds a following. And
Exactly.
I think that there's a lot to be said for it. So if you're starting from scratch with a new idea, it's like, how could this be 6 right from the beginning? And then, if that went well, how could you then do 8 more, or those sorts of things? How could this be sustainable?
Yeah.
This thing.
In the same ways, most YouTubers, like the vast majority of YouTube channels, are not high production, glossy anything, because there's too much writing on that. The stakes are too high every episode. It's like the classic kind of sitcom situation where it's like, well, this week if we don't do it, the whole thing collapses. Like, those are great sitcom stakes for fiction. In fiction, you don't want that for something sustainable. So I basically raised the stakes too high and then failed. I don't see it as a failure exactly, but I didn't continue to make the show.
And because so I guess you'd set the terms, you shot for the moon, you set the terms quite high. It delivered initially, but then how would you have known that it wouldn't have done? And it might have done, and that's the other thing, isn't it? It could have, a couple of algorithms gone in the other direction. Somebody else could have heard the show. And also, here's the other thing. I wonder, because in a way what we're trying to do is create an audio hit for the audience, but another part of it is you as a writer have produced a really high quality thing.
It's a calling card. Exactly.
And has it had any use in that? A loss leader in that sense, but has it got any traction in terms of just showing that you're serious about this?
So I sort of, it burned me out so hard, I sort of took a year off. It took a year of screenwriting, which turned into 2 years of screenwriting, which brings us to today. So it would be a useful calling card if I was actively going door to door or attending anything.
Right.
Can I tell you, this is not a question you've asked, but it's something that I think you want to know. The reason that I think it didn't take off.
Yeah.
I think there was no reason for anyone to tell their friends about it.
Okay.
And I think this is really like this. So I spent, like I said, the next year just off screenwriting, and this, I'm going to say failure, like just running through my head, and just because I didn't understand why it had happened. I felt like I had checked every box. I had gotten, professional working screenwriters to do a script edit. I'd gotten the best literally the best voice actors in the world to do it.
Yeah.
The writing was strong. The editing was strong. I thought I'd done everything. This is what I now think of as checkbox thinking.
Yeah.
Which is this idea that like the world owes you an audience. If you just check all the boxes, you'll get that audience. And it actually doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
In fact, you need to be like, those are the foundation. That, once you've done all the checkboxes, cool, you've now got flat ground upon which to build something.
Yeah.
And I feel like I had the flat ground, and then I kind of stopped there. Whereas nowadays, like Ted Lasso was a big eye opener for me. I don't know if you enjoy that show, but that show,
quite enjoyed it. Yeah. I've not seen all of them, but it's funny.
Season 1 anyway. Season 1, everyone in my life told me to watch that show.
Right.
I had literally double-digit people being like, "Hey Peter, have you watched Ted Lasso yet? Because it is a show for you."
Right.
And Night Crew, I am very proud of the script. I'm very proud of the production. I'm very proud of that. It's not a show for anyone except for maybe you and me.
Right. Yeah.
Like I can imagine someone listening to it and being like, "Hey James, you'll like this because it's got jokes in." And you'd be like, "A show with jokes in 2020?
Yes,
what is happening?"
Yes, please.
But it doesn't hit anyone where they live. Like there's no reason why you're rushing out to tell everyone. So a lot of the shows these days are, I think, almost going too far in that direction, where it's like, oh, we know that people, if this has a lesbian relationship, all the people will tell their lesbian friends to watch it. Cool, done. We've stopped thinking about it. I'm all in favor of.
Yeah, this is a lesbian vampire show. It's
exactly.
Like, okay, that's but yeah, I guess, and also I guess the clues might have been there because there's a sense in which you heard Cabin Pressure and you thought, I like that.
I could do that.
And so in a way you'd written kind of fan fiction.
Essentially, yeah. But the Cabin Pressure audience aren't on Kickstarter looking for a project to back. They're not on YouTube. They're on BBC Radio.
Yeah. And a million radios already waiting for a show to happen, and it starts. They haven't chosen to hear it. And once it's on, and then it's on again next week because they're in the car at the same time, and then they're on again. It's on again next week because they're washing up after dinner or before dinner or whatever. the way in which broadcast media work and how you get attention for a new thing for you as a new writer they overlap, but then they're not as
They're
they
not the
don't
same.
overlap as much as one thinks.
No, the biggest mistake that I feel I made in the even the conception of Night Crew is that I didn't look at the existing audience for audio things and think like, how will this appeal to them?
Right.
I just went, I'm going to make a show for me, which is sort of the advice we get as writers, like
Yeah.
make a thing that you will like.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but then to like build a business on it, which is, when you've put $5,000 in, you're essentially building a business.
Yeah.
It's about product market fit. It's about audience. It's about why will this go viral? That's really the question you have to ask. When you're making something for the internet, the question is, why will this go viral? Especially if you're looking to do something like a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Like Sitcom Geeks, I've listened to for a decade now. How long have you guys been doing it? I've been
We did it for
listening
a while.
since
Yeah. No, we finished in July, but yeah, we did it for 7-8 years. We did 220 episodes. Yeah.
I've listened to that in multiple countries. That's how long I've listened to that. And I've been here for a while now.
Yeah.
And that was me like seeking out, I want to learn more about sitcoms. Oh, these guys are writing professional sitcom stuff.
Yeah.
No one is like, maybe a Welcome to Night Vale viewer, which is the most successful audio drama or audio fiction ever made for podcasts. That audience is looking for something that's like Night Vale. Night Crew is not like Night Vale, despite the similar first 5 letters.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and so in a way, you just want to have a listen to what do audio audiences like. The people who are, so rather than people who are listening to radio, who can then catch up with it later on BBC Sounds or whatever,
Right.
the people who are heavy audio listeners, what are they
What are
like?
they looking for?
What are they looking for? Or what do you think you could surprise them with that would be attractive? And I get the sense that a lot of audio is science fiction and dystopia, and there's an awful lot of imaginative fiction on audio, but I guess Night Crew was like wasn't for science fiction fans. It was for regular folks who were open to science fiction, who liked Red Dwarf and Cabin Pressure or whatever. But if you'd made
in many ways, it was almost a parody of science fiction, but not enough to be like in jokey. Like one of the jokes in Night Crew is that there is like space is darker at night. Like it's just a fact of this world, and that makes no sense. And that's kind of the joke.
Yeah.
But if you're into sci-fi, that's not what that's not the kind of world that you're looking for.
Yeah. Whereas if you're totally immersed in a world and you just think I can go really niche and geeky on this, or you could make a funny true crime podcast.
Exactly. Because there is a huge market for that.
Yeah. So
there's a friend of mine in Brisbane who actually made a very successful audio drama, and he spent the last 10 years before that making Doctor Who fan fiction audio.
Right.
So he had his audience built in. He made it very Doctor Who adjacent, like it's really obviously directly inspired.
Yeah.
And so he had an audience built in, and he was making something to appeal directly to that audience. I had neither of those things.
Yeah.
And so there was just no one to watch it. Like at the time I was so confused. And now I'm like, who was going to watch that, Peter? Like, who is this for aside from you and James?
Yeah. Well, I really liked it. And that's why we're having this conversation. And I think there's but you've got to try these things, haven't you? And you've got to learn. And I wrote a novel that nobody wanted, really. I couldn't get it published, even though it involved Bletchley Park, and I had a sitcom on Radio 4 set in Bletchley Park during World War II, and spent ages and ages writing it. And my agent and I had an agent, a literary agent, and they said nobody wants this, and it's because I said it's basically Robert Harris but with jokes. And the answer, and to which they say, people who like Robert Harris don't want jokes.
Yeah. People who like Robert Harris have Robert Harris. People who like jokes have
Cary Pratchett. Exactly. Or have Douglas Adams, or have, And so I think it's one of those things where it hadn't occurred to me that this book would not be published. I didn't expect it to be wildly successful, but at least I thought you would be able to buy it as a book.
That was exactly me in Night Crew. I was like, look, first season will just fund, and I'll get to make a second season. That'll make a bit more. It never occurred to me that the first season wouldn't fund, because I'd had, $1 million of successful Kickstarters. I know how to run a Kickstarter, but it really, the market wasn't there.
Yeah.
I know we have to wrap up, so I don't want to go on too long, but there's a book by, I was talking about this before, there's a book by Zoe York,
Yeah.
It's called Finding Your Brand or Writing Your Brand or Loving Your Brand or something like that. I'll
Yeah.
send you the link.
Please do.
And I read that after Night Crew, and that really illuminated for me why it failed. This book is about writing and marketing romance novels. So it's
Okay.
not at all related to sitcoms. It's not all related to board games. But I have sold more board games since reading this book
Right.
because it talks about where your audience finds your book. And then this is so marketing heavy that as an artist, your
Yeah.
soul shrivels up when you hear it. But like with romance novels, people find it in one of two ways. They find it from romance influencers and they find it from Facebook ads. Write your novel from premise to
Yeah.
appeal to influencers or to appeal to Facebook ads, because then people will see the ad, they'll know what the book is, they'll buy it.
Yeah.
People will, hear the influencer will talk about it because it's in their niche,
Yeah.
and then people will hear about it and then people will buy it. And it's such a backwards way of thinking for me as a creative.
Yeah.
But I can tell you from the board game industry, it works.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. Yeah, we'll put a link to that below as well. That's really good. And I mentioned before we started recording, there's a show called the Novel Marketing Podcast, and one of his big things. So he barely talks about actually writing the novel, but his main thing is essentially, for heaven's sake, don't write a novel and then wonder, how am I going to promote this book?
Exactly.
It's not really any of the genres. Okay.
Right. I really should have asked myself, how do people find fiction podcasts?
Yeah.
What are the channels, basically? This is all Zoe York stuff. What's the channels? And then how do I make something to appeal to that channel? And I did neither of those things. I basically sat in a cave and chiseled something and then threw it outside and was like, where are all the people to admire the thing? Like, it makes no sense in retrospect.
Yeah. I looked at, I watched quite a lot of sort of how to do YouTube when I was, because I've made some videos, and you very helpfully pointed me towards stuff about thumbnails, and so and since then I've just, you've got YouTubers saying, if you don't have a thumbnail for your video, you don't have a video.
Yeah.
There's no point in even making the video if you don't know what the thumbnail is, because
isn't it? It's so backwards from what we're like taught as
that
creatives.
is how you use YouTube.
Yeah,
it's so easy to forget.
If you want to play the game, you got to follow the rules. It's that simple.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody the other day about monetizing audio. I think it might even have been a discussion about, because singer-songwriters who used to sell CDs, who's got a CD player now? I mean, you might have one in your car, but that's the only place you're listening to CDs.
You're not buying something for a car. Like, you're gonna listen to your iPod anyway.
Yeah. You would only buy a CD off a singer-songwriter because you feel sorry for them. You know what I mean? Because you're going to listen to it on Spotify,
or to support the artist. But at that point, just give them money. Don't make them.
And so we were sort of kind of talking about Patreon and a whole load of stuff, and there's so many insights on how there are podcasts that create content, and then they create so much bonus content that you can't take it, and so you only join the Patreon to support the podcast, and suddenly they're offering you more audio than you can use, and suddenly you feel like you're not getting value out of it, so you cancel your Patreon. I listened to the We Have Ways podcast, which is a World War II podcast, and I love the show, and I would consider joining the Patreon. They already make too many podcasts for me to listen to for free. So it's like, I don't want to, it feels like I'm paying you for homework. And what?
Yeah.
So
paying you for an obligation.
Once you have your own podcast, you think about monetizing it. Oh, I've got to give value. I've got to give. It's like, no.
No, you don't. The podcast is the value. The support, like the joy of supporting you, is the value that you're offering.
Yeah.
I read an amazing book that I really enjoyed, so I bought a copy for my housemate, and I gave it to her, and she's like, you've just given me like an obligation. Like, this is not a gift. This is homework.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's why. Just check they want the book before you buy it. Yeah. Mate, this has been an absolute joy. Go on, just wrap up. You're about to say.
Yeah, sorry. Last thing is that I mentioned I put the audio on TikTok, and my friend.
Did you? I didn't know that.
Not the whole thing, because there's a limit. But like as part of the promotion for Night Crew, I was finding my favorite excerpts and putting them up, and they weren't getting views. And I mentioned this to my friend who's into TikTok, and she's like, "Yeah, like there's no face. Like, people watch TikTok to connect with other humans. Within the thumbnail for a YouTube video, that's the first frame of a TikTok. You have one frame to get the audience before you lose them. And mine was a static image of the cover. And like, who's stopping on, like, it's TikTok. Who's stopping on a static picture of a
Yeah.
spaceship, to listen to characters they're not invested in talk about a thing they don't understand. Like, again, in retrospect, it's all just such nonsense. But at the
Yeah.
time, I was like, this is the way.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
was
But there's loads of great advice out there. We'll put some links below as well. But I'm really grateful for this and to hear, and you're writing some novels now, and that's kind of
yeah,
exciting. So keep me
doing it from the
posted on
ground
those.
up this time. I'm thinking
Yeah.
about channels from step one. It's a whole different experience. It's great.
Yeah. No, valuable lessons. Thank you for bearing your scars for the sake of others. I really
Thanks for having me on,
appreciate it.
James. Always a
Yeah,
pleasure.
cool. Thanks very much for listening or for watching, and I'll speak to you some other time. Cheerio.
Cheers.